Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started? So, hello everyone. Welcome to Ask the Grant Writing Experts. I'm Dr. Meg Bouvier. You know me as the creator of your library of NIH grantsmanship courses. I have over 35 years of experience at NIH as an applicant, an intramural researcher, a staff writer, and now as a full-time NIH grant mentor. I've helped clients land over $500 million in federal funding, and I'm here to answer your NIH grant writing questions. So grab a cup of coffee and let's get started. So a reminder that if you are attending live, and I see that people are still logging in, just a reminder that you're in listen only mode, but this is a Q&A session. I'm not going to do a mini tutorial today. We're in the middle of grant writing. Everybody is frantically racing for the October and November deadline. So feel free to start loading up the Q&A box with your questions. So, and I'll be answering questions throughout the session today. If you are watching this as a recording, and more people are doing that, I think the vast majority of people are doing that. Just a reminder that things change very quickly at NIH. Today is September 17th, 2025, and everything I'm saying today is true to the best of my knowledge, but man, things are changing fast at NIH. So always verify the information that you are hearing. What you should be viewing in the library right now, there are a number of things going on in the library right now. We have just uploaded our update to Master the R series, which is very exciting. So I recorded that. I think that was in late July, early August that I did that recording. Of course, there are already some things that are inaccurate in it. So, for example, at the end of chapter 1, I tell you how to subscribe to learn about new NOFOs by subscribing to the table of contents. And that is not how things are going to be released going forward. So I'm going to be updating it again before the October boot camp. We also have updates now available. I think we released them last week to Master the P series. So if you're thinking of writing a program project grant, a center grant application, P series application at NIH, there's a newly updated course available to you for that. And also Master the U series, the cooperative agreements at NIH. So I have a deep experience with both types of mechanisms. There are lots of samples and templates in those. So if you, and NIH has been releasing in the last couple of weeks NOFOs for center grant applications and the multi-project use. So if any of you are thinking of responding to those and have access to them, they're available to you. There's also a new course called Bonus Mini Tutorials, which is basically the mini tutorials that I give in this biweekly live Q&A sorted by topic, so that because we record the AGE sessions, but it's just one big recording. It contains all the Q&A. It contains all of this information. Sometimes there are guest presentations, etc. And it's not, and they're listed by date. So I thought it would be helpful if I clipped out the mini tutorials and listed them by title of mini tutorial, so that if, for example, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you're thinking, I wonder if Meg has ever given any advice on like how to work in Science CV to create my biosketch, or how do I do the progress? What's a good way to write a progress report on a competing renewal, or what are some tips for an R34? Those are listed by the title of the mini tutorial, and it's just the mini tutorial without all the other stuff. So I thought that would be helpful to people in terms of being able to find the information they need that might be kind of ancillary to what's in the writing courses themselves. The other thing is that there's a boot camp coming up. The live stream boot camp, the next one launches on October 9th at noon Eastern time, and it will run for 4 consecutive Thursdays. They usually go about like 90 minutes to 2 hours. It's about an hour of presentation, maybe a little less, and then lots of questions. So, and they're recorded. If you can't make them, you can always watch the recordings. Or attend live and get your questions answered. There'll also be a First Fridays, which is my virtual office hours, will be on Friday, October 3rd at 11:30 Eastern. So that's what's going on in terms of our services. Any NIH updates? There are lots of awards being made. I'm getting on a pretty regular basis right now I'm hearing from clients I worked with last fall about their applications being funded. So that's kind of nice. It's probably a flurry of institutes trying to spend down their FY 25 funds. So, and not only are we hearing about R&K applications being funded, but what's really gratifying is that I'm hearing about funding for mechanisms that historically have had low funding lines. So I think I had told you in our last session that I heard from a client who I helped write a transformative R01, which is part of the high risk, high reward portfolio of mechanisms out of the Office of the Director. He got funded. Those funding lines tend to be very low. And since we last met, I've also heard about a client who I helped with an R35 and NIGMS MIRA. He got funded. So, and I know we got lots of questions about the R35. We actually have more tutorials on writing the R35 planned for the fall. And then I just heard about a client who I helped with an R01 that apparently scored so well at NCI that the program officer converted it to an R37 award. So she now has 7 years of funding. So for those who don't know, the R37, you can apply for it. The program officer takes the most meritorious projects, and at their discretion and budget allowing, they will convert of a subset of the funded ones to 7-year R37. So lots of funding information coming out right now. It's also allowing me to see a lot of summary statements in the new scoring criteria. So we'll be doing a follow-up session on lessons learned from actually seeing summary statements from the new scoring criteria. So that's pretty exciting. So I had 2 questions that were emailed to me, and it looks like I have one that was submitted now. So let's start with the live question, and then I'll go to the emailed ones. Oh, and I did want to mention, it looks like Riley put in the chat the sign up for the boot camp that starts on October 9th, and for First Fridays, which will be on the first Friday of every month. This month it will be Friday, October 3rd at 11:30 Eastern. Okay, the question is, I have a few questions about the R21. The first one is, how many specific games are typically expected, and how similar or different should they be from each other? So very typically on the small format Rs, which would be like the R03, the R21, and I would also say like the research strategy of a typical K submission. 2 aims is pretty typical, but I do frequently see 3 aims as well. What you never see are 1 aim or 4 aims. That would not be a good setup. You need to restructure if that's what it's looking like. So I would say typically 2, but 3 would be okay as well. And the other part of that was how similar or different should they be from each other? Like on the R01, ideally they would be related but able to stand alone, meaning not contingent. But of course, that isn't always possible, right? So lots of you write applications, any R series application where the aims are contingent, meaning that you need the results from 1 aim to move on to the next aim. That always worries reviewers because they are worried that if you fail on like aim 1, that the whole project will fail. As opposed to like if you have 2 or 3 related aims that could be done concurrently, if you fail at one of them, you could still move on with the project and do the other aims. The way to handle that, as I've said many times, is to convince reviewers of the high probability of success on the early aim and point to things like the team's experience with the methods that are proposed and how much preliminary data you have already, et cetera. Would including a flowchart of the experiments strengthen the application? Sure. I mean, I think that anytime that you can create like an overview figure or some kind of flowchart, anytime that you can do something where reviewers who are skimming, like reviewers skim, right? Like that's the reality of what's going on at NIH. So you have assigned reviewers who read the application ahead of time, we hope, and they're skimming at the study section meeting to jog their memory because they've read 8, 10, 12 other applications. The other people at the study section meeting are only ever skimming. They don't read it. They're skimming while people are talking at them about the application. And similarly, people in the council meeting are skimming. So skimming reviewers, like always benefit from any kind of visual, as long as it's not gobbling up lots of space. So that's sure, why not? How many figures are appropriate to include? Apologies in advance for asking too many questions. I'm writing for the first time. No, that's great. I'm sure there are other people on this call who have, or watching this recording, who have similar questions. So good for you for asking. How many figures are appropriate to include? That varies wildly from application to application. So, on a small format R, like an R21, you might have 3 or 4 figures. I've seen people have 6 or 8 figures. You might have 1 or 2 figures. I've seen 12-page R1s with 25 figures. Like, it's kind of all over the place. I would say, like, on an R1, like maybe 8 or 10 would be like a median, but some people have far fewer, some people have far more. And on an R21, a small format R like that, I would say maybe 3 to 6 might be typical. 3 to 5 might be a typical number of figures. And I'm kind of like grouping figures and tables together in this scenario. So yeah, maybe like if for figures and tables combined, maybe 5 or 6 for an R21, but it's going to vary tremendously, depending on whether your preliminary data are best presented with a figure, whether you choose to do a table for your team, whether you have that overview figure. Whether you use a table for a timeline or describe it in text, it'll vary a lot. But anyway, those are some numbers. Another R21 question. I'm planning to expand my R21. Resubmission got a 12%. That's actually quite a nice score, but was not funded and submitted as an R01. So this is pretty typical where somebody may submit an R21 several times. And as they're resubmitting it, they're continuing to gather data using other funding sources. And rather than continuing to perseverate on resubmitting the R21, they shift into the R01. So that's pretty common. My questions are: 1, how to reach out to the program officer and get them excited about an R01. Okay, so I'm assuming that you have access to master the R series. Typically, people on this call, at least right now, have access to the courses. So I go into this in a lot of detail in chapters 1 and 2 of Master the R series. But what I would do, just in a nutshell, is if you're pretty certain about which institute you're going to submit to, I would do some research on what their funding priorities are right now. And there are lots of ways to do that, and I explain them in detail in the course. But some of the ways are you could look at the reporter website and see some of the things that the institute has funded recently. Sometimes they have reports that are broken down by scientific topic area. You could look for any appropriations reports that have come out. There hasn't been one in the last year under the current administration, but you could look at last year's because they usually do prospective planning across a number of years, even in appropriations reports. You could look at other types of strategic planning documents, and I give a URL in chapter 1 of Master the R series where you can search for strategic planning documents. And you can, the other really easy thing is to draft your specific aims and send it to the program officer and say, does this fit your funding priorities? Are there ways to adapt the aims to make it more responsive to the Institute's current funding priorities? I would argue that right now it's at least as important to make sure that you're aligned with the priorities of the current administration beyond the Institute's funding priorities. And there are lots of documents that describe the current administration's priorities, and many of those are linked in chapter 1 of the course. And then, you're going to email them first, send a draft of the aims, and I give a template for what that email might include. And then have a call with them. And I in the course, I go through lots of questions that you might want to ask them. But one of the key things to ask is, does this align really closely with your funding priorities? Another thing you can do is look at what they're funding, what kind of center grants they're funding. because those topics are usually like the highest priority for them in terms of funding priorities. It's a little trickier, like because there are going to be fewer topic-specific NOFOs. You can't really look at that to figure it out. You really have to dig a little deeper to figure it out. Okay, and then another question was, based on the new requirements, what would be your advice regarding use of animal models? Suggested as an alternative if organoid model doesn't provide enough data to prove to support the hypothesis. So keep in mind that the new guidance, and again, I actually have this in chapter 2 of Master the R series. I talk about this notice that was issued. Technically, the notice that was issued doesn't state that they're not going to fund animal model research anymore. It says they're not going to issue new NOFOs that exclusively fund the development of animal models. It does have language about how they're going to move away from animal only studies, but that's not like a hard and fast thing. And what I'm hearing from my clients is that the way institutes are going to handle this is going to vary from institute to institute. So this would also be a really good thing to discuss with your program officer. But in terms of being proactive to try to address this shift in what NIH is doing at the moment, you could do organoid models and animal models as two different aims in the same project. Or you could, as you suggested, you could do the organoid research and then say if as a potential problem, if that doesn't work, we could shift into animal models. But it's probably a good thing to discuss with the program officer, because the way that institutes are implementing this seems to be highly variable, with some institutes saying we're just really moving away from it right away, and other institutes saying no, we're still going to fund this for a bit. We're just not going to issue new NOFOs in that. So I would think about having that be part of your conversation with the program officer as well, and be prepared to discuss multiple options, some of which include using animal models and some of which don't. Okay, let's move on to the emailed questions. So I have one that says, my project overlaps pulmonary and oncology. I emailed the PO for NHLBI, but he suggested NCI as a more suitable avenue, to which the POs there agreed. The NCI POs agreed. There is no K23 through NCI, so I would have to submit a K08 instead. My mentors and I would like the submission to remain with NHLBI if possible. Was wondering if the team had any suggestion in reworking the specific aims to make it fit more with NHLBI. So this is a terrific question, and it's this whole issue of like NCI versus not NCI is something that comes up a lot with my clients. So for those who don't realize, like obviously based on the question, this person would like to go to NHLBI because they want to do a K23 and not a K08. And it's not offered at NCI. So they would like to go to NHLBI so that they can do the K23. But more importantly, what the person is not saying is that the funding lines at NCI are lower than at NHLBI. So that is, which is why so many of my clients come to me and say, how can I stop getting assigned to NCI? And there's no easy answers to this, because NCI is gigantic and they have gobbled up virtually all of the real estate that is even remotely related to cancer. So NCI is far and away the largest institute of the 27 institutes and centers at NIH. When NIH was doing appropriations testimony, which they have not done this year under the current administration, but when they did, NCI had like its own appropriation. It was like its own thing because it was so large. As a result, if there is anything in your application that is even remotely related to cancer, it's almost always going to be routed to NCI, even if there is a logical way that another institute might be interested in sponsoring it. So it's going to be very hard to get any project that has anything to do with cancer routed to any other institute outside of cancer. But what you could consider doing is removing the word cancer, if possible, from all of the high profile sections. That would be like, for example, the title, the aims page, the 30-line summary, the 3-sentence narrative. Um, anything that has to do with like words like oncology, or anything even remotely related to cancer, it's going to get routed there. So if there's a way to purge those sections of those words, and maybe just hint at an application to cancer in like a future directions section, and really focus it um, on, like I don't have any details of your project whatsoever, but if there's any way to focus it elsewhere, then I would do that. But my guess is because it's pulmonary and oncology, like if you're doing lung cancer, it's going to NCI. There's just no way around it. So, you know, that's how that goes. Okay, so yeah, it's unfortunate, but I don't have an easy answer for that. I submitted my early K99 in February and got a score of 24, 6th percentile. That's great. I'm unsure how this aligns with the current NCI payline, and would value your perspective on its competitiveness. I don't know. I have not, I know that everybody is talking about the fact that NCI said that for FY26, they were going to, right after the current administration said that they were recommending a 40% cut to the NIH budget, and before the Senate subcommittee and House subcommittee did not endorse those cuts, NCI kind of jumped the gun and came out and said, oh, our FY26 funding line for R01 is going to be 4%, which is like, down from like 7 or 8 for non-ESIs. I did not see anything about their K funding lines, so if anybody has information on that, I'd love to hear more about that. Historically, a 24 would be competitive, but not a slam dunk. And I don't know where they are with their K99 funding portfolio. I'm not sure. I'm trying to think if I've had an NCI applicant get funded with the K99. A lot of my folks submit K08s for NCI. So my advice to you is to email the program officer and see. They might be. I don't know if this has gone to council yet, but they might be picking up some of these Ks for funding in September as they try to spend down their FY25 budget. If this gets pushed off into FY26, you're probably in for a wait to see if this is going to be funded. But the other thing is, it was submitted in February, so I'm guessing it was a first submission because a resubmission would have been a March deadline. You can check this with the program officer also, but there's probably not a downside to prepping a resubmission while you wait, because if it's not going to be funded out of FY25 funds this month, and you get bumped into FY26, you may be in for a wait. And so there may not be a downside to submitting the resubmission, because usually in these circumstances, the institute will keep the first submission active in their system, so that if your resubmission scores worse, they could, in months to come, go back and pick up the first submission for funding. And you'll see the first submission in ERA Commons with a tag that says MAA, multiple active applications. But just double check that with the program officer. So 2 things you want to ask the program officer. Is this, likely to be funded in September out of FY25 funds, or might it still be up for consideration for FY26 funds? And if I were to write a resubmission, does this remain active in the system and under consideration for funding, even if I resubmit under a multiple active application code? Yeah, I'll keep my fingers crossed for you. That's a nice score. And this is a follow-up. I already have a support letter from my mentor, but I'm unsure where else I could obtain additional letters. Do support letters significantly strengthen the grant application? If so, would having one from the department chair improve my chances of success? Um, I'd have to go and look at your specific NOFO. But if you go into Master the K series and look at chapter 7, I have an entire chapter on the types of letters that you can request and who to ask for a letter. I don't offhand remember if they, and I don't know which K99 it is. I don't offhand know if this is a situation where you want institutional letters, mentor letters, and letters of support from people not related to the application. So look at your NOFO and see what kind of letters they recommend. And then in chapter 7 of Master the Case series, I talk about who you should ask. Usually if it's a letter of support, it's from somebody who knows your work but is not directly involved in the application. And often an institutional letter can be helpful. This is also a really good question for your pre-award support office because they probably have put in other K99s and might know what has worked for your organization in the past on that specific K99 mechanism. Okay, and here's somebody else saying that's so interesting. I always thought people would prioritize going to NCI since it's the biggest institute with the most funding. I did not realize there are people who try to go to other institutes like NHLBI instead. So before I read the second half of your question, I just want to comment on that. NCI does indeed have far and away the biggest budget. They also have far and away the most applicants. So, the number of people applying for that larger pot of money is also larger, right? And their funding lines historically on non-ESI R01s has been piss poor compared to other institutes. So it is really problematic. So you might see funding lines at other institutes at like 11%, 14%, 15%. And then NCI was like at 7 or 8%. And now they've halved it. So yes, it's a larger pot of money, but you have far more people competing for that pot of money. The other thing is that I have to emphasize that fit to the mechanism and the institute is hugely important. So I started this session by talking about that client who got a transformative R01. That person, the transformative R01 has an incredibly low funding line. It's super competitive to get that. This applicant came to me saying, I keep getting triaged on the parent R01 mechanism. I keep submitting my idea to to the parent mechanism and trying like different institutes and study sections, and I keep getting triaged. And in talking with him, it turned out that he was proposing something that was highly unusual for NIH to fund. So like we figured like, let's try the transformative R01. And even though the funding line is so much lower on that than on a traditional parent R01, he did get funded on that. So you don't just go where there's more money. There's way more to the story than that, including funding lines, but especially fit to the institute and the mechanism. Okay, are we not worried that NHLBI may be dissolved as previously proposed? Both POs of NCI and NHLBI deem my specific aims for KO8 appropriate for their institute. Do you have any suggestion as to how to strategize it for a successful application? No, I'm not worried about NHLBI being dissolved. And in fact, there is evidence that Congress has absolutely no appetite for restructuring at NIH. So I don't think it's going to happen. I'll just say that. I don't think it's going to happen. NCI won't be dissolved for sure. I mean, I think everybody's confident about that, but I'm not terribly worried about NHLBI being dissolved either. I would, let's see, it's a KO8. All else being equal, meaning like your fit to the institutes is truly equivalent, right? Ceteris paribus, it's truly equivalent. So like when you go into the reporter website and you look at recently funded KO8s at both institutes, and you truly feel like, wow, I could very well fit into the portfolio of either of these, I would pick NHLBI because the KO8 funding line at NCI has historically bounced around and at times been the worst I have ever seen in all my decades at NIH on all K mechanisms anywhere ever, such that I had a client who had a 16 on a KO8 at NCI like 2 years ago and did not get funded. So I am very gun shy when it comes to the KO8 at NCI for that reason. You could ask the program officer for the KO8 at NCI, like what is likely to happen in the upcoming year in terms of the funding line for the KO8. But just thinking ahead, right? Like if you land a KO8 at one of these mechanisms, you're setting yourself up for writing R1s at that institute as well. And while the ESI funding line at NCI, they've been trying to protect it and make sure that it isn't slashed to ribbons. The R1 funding line for FY26 at NCI is they've reported that it's going to be 4%. That's going to be really tough if that's the line that they're going to take going forward. So all else being equal, and I'm not, like once you really dig into reporter, is it really going to be truly equivalent? I don't know. I would ask the two of them about both POs about the what they anticipate the funding line will be on the KO8 and FY26, but I would still kind of lean toward the NHLBI. So. Do you have any suggestions as to how to strategize it for a successful application? Well, once you decide on the institute, you want to tailor it to that institute, obviously. Like you could have the exact same project, but if you write it for NCI or you write it for NHLBI, all of the pieces around it, like the significance and the impact and things like that, are going to look a little like different, right? Depending on which institute it is and which study section it's going to. Yeah, and I would just follow all of the prep steps that I talk about in chapter 1 about like doing your due diligence and looking on Reporter and, vetting your project idea, which in the case of a K would be not just the Ames page, but your training goals, vetting those with colleagues or at Chalk Talks or at your institute, and then vetting them with the program officers as well. And we have a comment here from an RD. Several K99s we've helped with needed a specific institutional commitment letter with stated requirements of what to put in the letter. So yeah, for that K99 applicant, you really need to go look at your NOFO and see exactly what they're asking you to do, because that was my impression, is that there's usually an institutional letter is at least optional, if not required. And this person is saying that there were really specific things that were requested in that letter. Okay, that takes care of the questions that were typed in and one of my emailed questions. So let's go to the other emailed question, which is actually an addition to one that was asked 2 weeks ago. So this person is saying my R21 grant received a score of 21% on the first submission and 35% on the second. At my program officer's request, my co-PI and I spent about 10 hours prepping a written response to the reviewers. And we've talked, that's also called a rebuttal letter, and I gave a mini tutorial on rebuttal letters within the last month or two with samples of how to write it. So you can go in that bonus mini tutorials course and find that mini tutorial if you're interested in what they look like. They can be a lot of work, even though they're short. Short documents often take a lot more work than long ones. During our discussion, the PO reviewed my responses but did not provide arguments. Later, she asked for my opinion on another project with hypotheses opposite to mine, and in the end, simply advised me to resubmit. This left me uncertain about the purpose of preparing the response letter for her before the council meeting. If funding decisions are already determined by percentile, which they are not, and that will be less true going forward, that the percentile, the score is going to dictate whether it's funded. I think that's going to be less and less true with fewer subject matter experts on council. And I've talked about that last week in my concerns. Why was such a detailed response for her needed? What was it meant to inform her decision making or to provide input for the council meeting? You mentioned rejection after the council meeting, but that meeting has not yet taken place. This experience also felt inconsistent with my prior submission when my score was 21%. She just told me to resubmit without being asked for a response letter. Although she spent over an hour with me and acknowledged that my proposal is novel and aligned with the mission priorities, I felt she was not very helpful. I would value your input as you may have deeper insights. And he said, it's also possible that she was trying to help me think about these things in depth. I was just a little frustrated. So yeah, so here's the situation. Of course, like I don't know what was going on in your program officer's mind, but I do have opinions about what it might be, as you suspect. So first off, I think a of course, a lot of people have been laid off at NIH. So there are fewer people and less experienced people doing the job that program officers have historically done. So I think first off, we have to acknowledge that program officers that you're dealing with are busier than they've ever been because it's the same workload spread over fewer people. And many of them are not as seasoned as some of the people who are no longer there. So that's number one. Number two, the people who are there are in a structure that does not resemble anything they have known in the past. So they themselves are probably quite uncertain about what is going to happen when they walk into the closed session of a council meeting and there are members of council who are, potentially not subject matter experts who are going to be weighing in on a decision. So if I were a program officer in that situation where maybe I had less experience and I'm overworked and I'm going into a council meeting where like I don't know what's happening, going forward, I might ask for more material for me to argue persuasively for funding for an applicant whose project I would like to see funded. It's possible that that's what that person was doing, was trying to gather some information to inform their pitch, their funding pitch for you at council. And it's possible that they got information after they made that request before the meeting, stating that less money would be available for these projects than they were initially led to believe. So that's a possibility as well. I wouldn't see this as a waste of time because it is an exercise you would have had to go through anyway in order to write the introduction to the revised application and to inform, or even if it was going in as a third submission, like a new submission, going through that exercise of parsing out the comments and thinking about how you would address them is going to inform the writing of your third submission, new R21, even if it's not a resubmission and there is no intro. But I can't imagine the program officer asking you to go through that just for the intellectual exercise of informing your resubmission. My guess is that when she made the request for you to write the rebuttal letter, she really truly believed that there was a chance of funding. And when she asked you to make to write a resubmission, she either had come into information or received some sort of information or knowledge that led her to believe that that was no longer the case. Or she felt like it's unlikely that it will be funded, so it's better for you to just hedge your bet and just start working on the resubmission and get that going as fast as possible. So those are some of my guesses. Of course, we will never know, and I wouldn't ask because it would seem impertinent to say, if you were going to tell me to resubmit, why did you have me go through all that work of writing the rebuttal letter? But rest assured that the work that you put into writing that rebuttal letter, most certainly that was intellectual work that you and your co-PI were going to have to do anyway in order to inform the next submission of the R21 for whatever that's worth. I would be frustrated too. Like I totally get that. That is a very frustrating thing. But I think there is a high degree of chaos and misinformation that's even within NIH right now. So it's, I think the program officers are doing their level best to try to keep applicants informed, even as things are changing rapidly within their structure. So, so that's what I have to say about that. And we're just about out of time. I don't see any other applications, so any other questions. So I'm going to wrap up by just reminding people that um, I think I have one more Q&A coming up, our next biweekly Q&A. Oh no, wait, I think I actually changed the topic of that. Um, Yes, we did change the topic. So just so people know, the next biweekly live Q&A was supposed to be a third Q&A session, and we quickly put in a Common Forms mini tutorial because NIH has finally released the Common Forms, which will allow you to use Science CV to create your biosketch. I think it's actually going to be required. So we wanted to get that information out as quickly as possible. So we kind of snuck it into that third Q&A. So that is going to be on October 1st. It's going to be a mini tutorial on the Common Forms. And we'll have an accompanying blog post for that. And I just wrote a blog post also about strategies to help you survive the current funding landscape for anybody who's interested in that. That was published today. And then First Friday is virtual office hours again, Friday, October 3rd at 11:30 Eastern. You can come, it's not recorded, very informal. You can come and ask your questions. And then boot camp, our live boot camp of Master the R series kicks off on October 9th, Thursday at noon Eastern time, with 4 consecutive Thursday sessions. And you can come and ask me as many questions as you like about the as you launch toward the writing of your February or March or K series application. So that's it. We will wrap up today. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. As the French would say, courage. And I will see you, hopefully some of you, at the next biweekly live Q&A for the mini tutorial on the Common Forms, which is October 1st, or First Fridays on October 3rd, or the live stream boot camp on October 9th. Lots of opportunities to come and barrage me with questions. So thank you, everybody, for coming. I wish you the best of luck, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Take care. Bye-bye.